Growing up in the early 2000s, there was one game that completely dominated the markets, that of course being Grand Theft Auto Vice City. But those of us too young to play GTA had to instead settle for its knockoff. The Simpsons Hit And Run is an open world racing game that places you within the fictional world of the show during the Halloween season. The game was developed by Radical Entertainment as a successor to their previous 2001 Simpsons tie-in, Road Rage, a game where you acted as a sort of taxi service for the citizens of Springfield for a vast array of the show's cast, while at the same time trying to raise $1 million to prevent Mr. Burns from replacing all of the public transit systems in the town with biohazardous toxic buses. Yeah, so as you can probably guess, Road Rage was a bit of a mess upon its release, with it receiving rather rough reviews that saw critics critiquing its unpolished and underdeveloped driving, its terrible and repetitive mission design that saw you completing the same 1 minute long task over and over again, and even back then, horrifically bad graphics. But Radical was determined to continue their Simpsons game ambitions, with them acknowledging the criticism and making the tough decision to go in a completely new direction for their next project that would allow for them to pursue a more creative endeavour. And this change in direction totally was not because they were getting sued by Sega for completely ripping off their game, Crazy Taxi. So, after a bit of brainstorming on what to do next, they decided to make the only logical decision and rip off an even bigger game, with their next venture taking heavy inspirations from GTA staples, like an open world, vehicle theft, police chases, and of course, violence. Kinda? Fun fact, the player's ability to attack others was a feature the team completely hid from the Simpsons creator, Matt Groening, in fears that he wouldn't allow them to implement it. And, unfortunately for them, it was the first feature he discovered upon playtesting the game, which he subsequently used to kick Marge all the way down to the Quickie Mart while laughing hysterically. The switch in genre wasn't the only change the studio made in their approach to their next project, with them also deciding to work hand in hand with the Simpsons showrunners, scriptwriters, and voice actors to allow for a more cohesive and familiar feeling experience to the show. And, after 3 years of development, The Simpsons Hit And Run was released on September 16, 2004 for the PlayStation 2, original Xbox, and GameCube, with a port for the PC coming a couple of months later. And by God, it was incredible. Every second of this game genuinely felt like a moment ripped straight out of the show. To give you a quick synopsis on what the game entails, it was broken up into 7 different levels that take place over the span of 6 days, with you assuming control of 5 members of the Simpsons cast across the 4 different sub-districts of Springfield, where you need to find a way to free the town from the 2 different overarching threats that eventually culminates into one large plot. The primary theme of the game was once again based around the driving, though this time, instead of it being used to aimlessly transport random NPCs from point A to B over and over again, it was instead a tool for exploring the world and completing select missions and races given to you by popular members of the Simpsons cast. And in comparison to their previous attempt, the driving in this game was amazing. Gone was the jagged and jarring movement of vehicles, instead replaced with a smoother feeling and well-developed driving system that allowed you to seamlessly maneuver whichever car you chose through the Simpsons suburbs. And pairing that up with the immaculate design of the map that transformed the city of Springfield into a giant arcade racetrack, complete with obstacles, multiple platforms to perform stunt jumps, tightly rounded corners, and a plethora of shortcuts sprinkled throughout, made for a truly exceptional experience. And the team didn't just stop at the driving aspects, they also poured tons of hours into developing the free roam aspect of the game, recreating tons of iconic landmarks and interiors from the show, as well as incorporating a few of their own hidden gags and Easter eggs. Upon its release, Hit And Run was praised by fans and critics alike, with it being titled the most accurate rendition of Springfield in the video game format. And not only that, it perfectly filled a void in the market for a GTA alternative that could be enjoyed by anybody, kids and adults alike, and its unit sales reflect this praise, with an executive producer revealing that the game sold between 8 and 10 million copies, making it the most successful Simpsons game to date. So it really is a surprise that we never got another one. Well, that wasn't always going to be the case. The team behind the game was not only willing, but excited at the prospect of creating future Simpsons games. So, what happened? Where are the games? Well, to answer that question, it boils down to 2 of my favourite things: complete corporate incompetence, and possible internal espionage. See, sequels for the game were planned, and the release window for the next iconic instalment was indeed given of 2007, but that year's come and passed, and nothing substantial came from it. Well, apart from the Sopranos ending, but I'm 72% sure that's unrelated. No, the reason for the cancellation of all the planned Simpsons games is because of one man. And the best part is, I don't know who. Nobody does. In November 2024, an employee for the former studio, Joe McGinn, revealed in an interview with Summoning Salt that an executive of Radical Games publisher, Vivendi, simply rejected the idea of pursuing future Simpsons games. There were no development issues, nor contract disputes. In fact, they had the license to make 3 more additional games completely free of charge. And keep in mind, this is during the early 2000s, when The Simpsons was by far the most popular family on television, and still, one person simply said no, and that was it. A possible franchise that's beloved by millions was killed in its cradle because of a singular person's decision. But I know what you're thinking. It's been over 20 years since Hit and Run released. Surely that singular person has either left the publishing agency, if not died by now, right? And besides, events like this have happened before, where a franchise has laid dormant for decades, just for another installment to be announced out of nowhere, any minute now. And yeah, that's true, but, well, flashback to what I said a minute ago. Former studio. The company doesn't exist anymore. In fact, neither does their parent company, with them being merged with Activision to form Activision Blizzard, and then Microsoft. And even beyond that, the company who originally leased the license out to them, Fox, is now defunct and merged with the mouse, and that creates some issues. Legal issues. Now, I'm not a legal expert, but to give you a very basic rundown, Vivendi, or now Microsoft, still technically hold the rights to Hit and Run, just not The Simpsons. That honour was passed down to EA after nothing new was released by Radical. So, for them to get the rights to a sequel back, they would first have to wait for EA's license to expire, which potentially may have already happened. Then, find a way to somehow convince Disney to sign over the rights to them again, making the possibility of a sequel extremely slim. But at least a remaster is still possible, right? Well, about that. During the start of the new decade, there was a major political shift in the world. Now, I'm not going to go too in depth on what caused said shift, but what I am going to explain is the effect it had on the media industry. Tons of popular characters from books, TV shows, movies and games that were perceived as either problematic or racist were drastically altered, if not downright removed, from their respective medias. Some notable examples of this being Cleveland from Family Guy, Token from South Park, and the one that's important here, Apu from The Simpsons, who just so happens to be the 5th playable character in Hit and Run. The role Apu plays in Hit and Run cannot be understated. Not only does he have an entire chapter of the game dedicated around him, but he also appears within every single level to at least some capacity. In level 1, he appears in the first mission. In level 2, he appears in the 5th mission, chasing you around in an attempt to stop you from selling roadkill. In level 3, he appears in the 3rd mission, where he successfully recovers the roadkill from the previous chapter. In level 4, he appears in the last mission, where he gives you an objective to destroy every Buzz Cola truck. He can also appear as one of your opponents in the street race. In level 6, he appears in the first mission, where he refuses to help Bart, and in level 7, he will drive you around if you select his vehicle, making level 7 the only section of the game where he has no relevance to the story. And that brings us to the 3rd and final reason. Even if a way to write Apu out of the story could be thought up, it wouldn't really matter, due to the fact that licensed games just don't really exist anymore. The culture around movies to games has drastically changed, and by changed I mean has done a complete 180. A few years ago, movie and TV show tie-in games were all the rage, with countless examples of cheaply made slop being produced to capitalise on a respected bit of media success. But nowadays, it's the complete opposite. Games are now the ones transcending into different forms of media, meaning unless it's an already established multimedia IP like Star Wars, a comic book superhero, or some easy to make cash cow mobile slop, it's simply not happening. And unfortunately, that's the position Hit and Run has found itself in. In fact, it's a bit worse than that, seeing as how The Simpsons' own mobile game, Tapped Out, has just recently been removed from the market after almost 14 years, which puts a bleak sign on any hopes of any future installments, meaning it's questionable if we'll ever see another Simpsons game again.